But, how did it happen? I started off this essay series by saying, look, we hear a lot about the crisis of the West. So what's the West? And when you go back to that question, you realize that the only reason we're talking about West at all is that we're talking about what used to be Western Christendom. The only thing that ties the West together was the Catholic Church, really. There's nothing else that these countries have in common with each other. The West has spent enough time fighting amongst itself for 1,000 years, right? So the thing that tied us together was the Christian faith. And the Christian faith, the Western Christian faith, morphed into, through the Enlightenment and the Reformation and various other kind of upheavals, it morphed into liberalism. And so liberalism is almost, to me, Christianity without Christ. Mm-hmm. And then liberalism has kind of morphed as it's fallen apart into whatever we would call the social justice movement, the woke movement, which is kind of the Sermon on the Mount without God or forgiveness, which is a really terrible sermon. But we've got to that point precisely because once you unmoor the individual from culture and nature and God, then you're lost. And so the question becomes, what the hell do we do about that at this point? And the answer can't be just going back to something, because you can never go back to anything. You can't return to the 12th century even if you wanted to, just as the liberals can't return to the 18th or the 19th century, which is what they'd like to do at the moment. There's no going back, except, as far as I can see, and I'm sort of thinking as I go along on this, that, if God is real, and if the story of Christ is real, which a Christian believes it is, then that's eternal and that's always there. And that hasn't gone anywhere, whether or not we've forgotten about it. So if you return, as you say, as so many people are through different routes, if you start to return back to the sacred center, regardless of, forget about the culture for a minute, if you return back to that and you start to build yourself around that, then the culture kind of builds itself around you. So I think I've got to the point where I'm thinking the only work that's useful to do at this point is a kind of reconstruction project. You start right at the beginning, you start right on the ground again, locally, and you start to build up places where we can be human again, actually. And there's a real need for that. And I'm also, maybe like you, I'm just seeing this stuff everywhere. People from so many different backgrounds and traditions and cultures and left and right and neither are all coming together and saying exactly that there's a void. And people can feel it, and they're trying to find out what it is. And it's, as I say, becoming a Christian certainly shocked me. I didn't know that was going to be the answer, but it seems to have been the path I was taken down. So I'm still kind of digging into it, really.